Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, and I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool News, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Brightbites. And as many of you, I'm sure, are already aware, Brightbites is the leading end-to-end data solution for providing education organizations with comprehensive data management from integration to analysis. And what that means is that Brightbites helps educators turn big data into big benefits for students. Now, over the next hour, we're going to take a look at how districts are leveraging EdTech data to understand the effectiveness of their programs and determine what kind of return on learning they're generating. And in particular, we're going to drill down into the data efforts of Metro Nashville Public Schools. And after that, we'll talk about what it might take for your institution to implement its own data initiative and develop a framework to understand its impact. And I'll introduce our speakers very shortly. But first, I apologize. I'm going to bore you for a couple of minutes with some housekeeping items. First, today's event will be recorded. So in a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us when the recording is ready. And you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And second, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any point during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I think we're probably going to have about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We do have a chat function, which you can launch if you look down at the bottom of the console at the blue group chat icon down there. That is our chat function. Use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team if you have any technical issues or any other concerns during the webinar. But I do have one favor to ask you. Please don't use the chat function to ask the panelists questions. They're just not going to have time to monitor the chats while they're presenting. So if you have a question for them, please use the Q&A panel instead. And if, like me, you sometimes find it hard to see the text on some of these slides, you can make the slideshows bigger by clicking on the icon in the upper right-hand corner of the panel titled Presentation. It looks like 4 arrows pointing in opposite directions. And you can also move the panels around by dragging them around the console. And with that out of the way, I want to welcome our speakers. Doug Renfro is Executive Director of Learning Technology and Library Services in the Metro Nashville Public Schools. And Doug's department works with schools to implement and support instructional technology and assure that they're following best pedagogical practices. And he recently received his Certified Education Technology Leader endorsement from COSIN. And our other speaker today is Brett Lambert, and he's the Director of Partnerships at Brightbites. And Brett is a former middle school teacher himself and an at-risk youth counselor who's worked in underserved communities across the San Francisco Bay Area. And Brett is passionate about helping K-12 educators bridge the gap between technology use and student engagement. Doug and Brett, it's a real honor to have you here. Doug, why don't you get us started?
Thank you very much. As said, my name is Doug Renfro. I'm with Metro Nashville Public Schools, and I'm going to just take you a little bit on our journey, starting with before we found Brightbites, and then after we found Brightbites, and then where we're going in the future. So it's just a little bit of story time, which we all like to hear sometimes. So tell you a little bit about our district. Our district is about 150 schools, 6,000 teachers, currently at around 87,000 students, and we have 120 different languages spoken in our district. We're a growing city, much to the chagrin of myself when I'm trying to drive around in the traffic. But what is unique about our school district is there's lots of other school districts out there exactly the same as us, and we're looking for ways to leverage any advantage we can, especially when it comes to technology. We have the same challenges that many districts have. Last year, our big challenge was finding mathematics teachers for our high school, for our integrated math. So we have to really search and dig to find solutions to the problems as they face a growing district. and a district like all others that are increasingly becoming cash-strapped and just don't have the availability of the money. We have so many different projects going on. So that's just a little bit about Metro Nashville. So let's talk about our data journey and where we are and where we're going. So what are we doing now? What are we doing? Well, our journey really started, go back and look at these technology plans around technology implementation in 2002. That was the first documented technology plan that we had in our district. They ran 4-year plans, 5-year plans. These plans were heavily influenced by the technology department, and that was great at that time. There was a lot of content in these plans at this time about telecommunications, about websites, a lot of foundational technology supports that need to go into place in order to move a district forward. And this included getting devices in the hands of teachers, getting projectors up in the classrooms. Within those 9 years of plans, there were about 4 pages that were directly addressing technology instruction, using technology for instructional purposes in the classroom. And we just were making it down that road. Like I said, we had to do broadband. We had broadband. We had wireless that we had to put in place. So towards the end of these plans, it was around 2010, was when the district moved forward and put in some technology coaches, district technology coaches. And there were, again, we have 150 schools. There were 3 of us that they were put in place to be district technology coaches. And now that we have the infrastructure in the schools, or some infrastructure in the schools, now we need to start moving forward with instructional technology and helping the teachers use this effectively in their class. So, did that plan work? I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that I don't know the answer. Yes, we did get infrastructure in place. Yes, we got devices in the hands of the teachers. Yes, we have projectors in every classroom when we moved away from the overhead projectors that we needed to change bulbs in and purchase a lot of bulbs for. But we still weren't making the connection to learning. And that's why we're in the school system, is we have to make that connection to learning. And we know that technology has to play a role for a variety of factors, whether it's languages, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's dollars. So in 2010, 2011, knowing that we had infrastructure in place, we developed a new department. And this department was the Department of Learning Technology and Library Services that I came into as a technology coach. I was one of the luckily got to work in this department. And it combined 2 important factors together, learning technology and, in some cases, the people that were spearheading all the learning technology in our schools, or in a lot of our schools, and that was library services. So it brought 2 very powerful, one small but one large, powerful entities together to start talking about how technology was going to be used for our students in the schools. We are lucky in Tennessee that we have a requirement that every school have a librarian. It is a fantastic thing to have. They are a driving force, and often in many schools, for technology. So it was 2011, and it was time to embark on a new plan. We had finished up the 9 years previously that were all about infrastructure. Like I said, 4 pages about instruction, and we started to put together a new plan. And we started out strategically by changing it and putting the learning technology plan at the forefront of this conversation. We did change the word template. We thought that was kind of nice that we would update the word template. But this one also included about 40 people on the foundation of writing the plan. And not only did we have the learning technology department, We had community partners, we had students, we had teachers, all in on writing this plan so that we could really start to push the envelope forward around learning technology. So here's some examples of what we had in our learning technology plan. We know that we have to keep pushing on infrastructure because it is moving so rapidly that if we don't keep an eye on it, we're going to fall behind. So we did have a lot of the infrastructure components in there: sufficient internet, enterprise wireless. We wanted to put a technology purchase type request review process in place. We wanted to achieve a one-to-one, and we wanted a refresh plan. But where we got in was we really started adding the learning components. Our standards state standards had not been updated, so we implemented MMPS technology literacy standards based on the ISTE standards. Many of y'all are doing the exact same thing. You can see a call. This was when Common Core, we are now Tennessee state standards, but we wanted to make sure everything was aligned to Common Core. We added a freshman seminar in. This was actually a blended class that every freshman took, and it had components of digital literacy as a part of that. That class still goes on and is a requirement for graduation today. A few more things that we had in here. Librarians were to serve as instructional designers in the schools. They were really supposed to get into the classrooms on a flexible schedule and start working with those teachers on how to implement technology in their classrooms and really start to co-plan with them. We were really pushing hard on blended learning at this point in time, and we wanted every school to establish a plan for how blended learning was going to roll out. We had some that went wall to wall, every teacher within a one-year window. We had some that did it by grade level. So we left some flexibility to the schools to how to implement. We established virtual school, which many of you all have also done. And we wanted technology literacy assessments to be administered at all tiers so we could get a feeling for where our students were at with regards to technology. And then graduates completed at least one online course as part of their graduation requirement. And that was very important, given that, you know, most of them are going to be taking some sort of online course at some point in time in their career, whether that's secondary college education, or even if it's just going into the workforce. So much training is done in an online environment. So here we were measuring our action steps. What did we complete? What did we not complete? We were really looking at these and checking them off. You know, did we have enterprise wireless in the schools? Yes. Did we have schools having a blended plan? Yes. Freshman seminar was launched? Yes. And do we still know if it works? Again, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that I don't know the answer. We put learning at the forefront, but we were not measuring where we needed to be measuring, or we were not capable of measuring at that point in time where we needed to be measuring. We struggled with the technology assessment at our schools and getting that rolled out and getting all the students to take a technology assessment. We struggled with having all teachers taking technology assessments so we could figure out where they were at. So we struggled with measuring this plan. We could mark off some of the action steps that they were completed, but we did struggle with some of this parts of the plan and measurement. At the same time, we had some challenges coming down the pike. And I've talked to the challenge I'm getting ready to address, I've talked to many districts that have faced this challenge. In Nashville, we called it student-based budgeting. Student-based budgeting means that we take our allotment of funds and we're basically giving it to the schools in a bulk amount, and the schools have to plan for it. If a student, you get a base amount for a student, and you get multipliers if they're an EL student, if they're a special ed student. And then we also give them, if they're poverty, we give them their Title I funds. And the principals have to plan how to use all these funds, including making sure that they hit the state requirements, so they know that they have to have a librarian in their school. So that's a state requirement, so they have to budget for that. We took this all the way down to copiers. If you're paying for your copier, your paper, this is all in your budget. And for a lot of schools, I know that when I went through my graduate work, I took a class on how to fiscally run a school, and that was the last time when I was in a school that I addressed all these components. We've even taken this down now to the point where if you watch your energy consumption in your school, you can actually, we have slotted amount for energy consumption, you can actually get cash back into your budget based on how, making sure the teachers turn off their lights at night and things like that to try and reduce the energy use. So what we got, and it's a great idea that you give the principals the flexibility. They know their schools and they know their student population and they know what they need to have to support that student population. But what we got was kids in a candy store. For a lot of schools, they got a lot more money than they had seen before. You know, especially our magnet schools and things like that. The way the funding formula worked out, we had been underfunding some of our schools, and we had some resulting challenges with regards to technology at this point in time. They went shopping. So we have over 300 software titles running in the district. We have SIG monies being spent one way, and Title I monies being spent another way, and local dollars being spent another way. So we had very diverse purchasing and device purchasing. We had a lot of man hours because we were going to a lot of integrated systems. You know, we changed our SIS and we're more reliant on integrated systems. And so we had a lot of man hours spent on trying to make products work and where the data could come in. And we had schools that couldn't understand why I purchased this and you've got to put student data into this piece of software, why it would take so long to get things in place. You know, we had a purchasing agreement. We also had a data use agreement and things like that. So we had a lot of pushback from schools about why was there a lag in student access and usage to a lot of these products. That was some, and then we had the schools that were merrily marching along, just buying everything and not really even knowing if it was being used. They would purchase a piece of software because a fourth grade teacher saw it when they went to ISTE and they loved it. One way or the other, right or wrong, you know, that's the way it works. I remember when I was in the classroom, there was a product called ThinkLink that I wanted because I really thought it could impact my students. That became Discovery Education Assessment Tool, or DEA, later on. And, you know, I just went and lobbied to my principal, and you know what? She bought it for me because I was in the computer lab and I was supposed to know what was best with regards to that. So we had a lot of schools that marching happily along, spending their money, and but we were still not sure what we were measuring and what we were getting out. And that's when one component, Brightbites offers a lot of different things, but one of the components, the first component that we brought on was the technology and learning module. So to give you a little bit of information about this module, this is a report that comes out of that module. And it centers on the CASE score. And you can ask lots more questions about this later, but let me tell you, it's a survey. It is a self-reported anonymous survey that we implement in grades 3 through 12 and to all our teachers. And if you're listening to this, you're either using Brightbites or you're interested in using Brightbites. And you can look at the each section of that, classroom access, skills, and environment. And this is actually our data. We've got some work to do, but we've got some strong pieces too. And it looks at things like professional development. It looks at things like digital citizenship. It looks at teacher skills. It looks at teacher access, student skills, and and then also the environment. And one of those is, again, professional development. So let's talk about when we brought on Brightbites. We were first shown Brightbites in March of 2016. And we're closing out the school year. We're still struggling. We're at the end of, we're closing on the end of our technology plan. And we're still trying to find a measure. So Brightbites, we picked up on Brightbites, and in March we found it, we purchased it, and we deployed in May. So a very quick first deployment of the product. And in that first year, remember, we have 87,000 students, 6,000 teachers. We had about 13,000 responses. And 4,000 of that was teachers, and then 9,000 of that was students in grades 3 through 12. Brightbites does look for the number of responses at each school to reach statistical significance, so that we know that we have enough responses at a school that the data is valid. So in that first year, we hammered it in May and got those responses, and we did a lot of analysis of data. We're trying to plan strategies. This was mainly at a district level at this point in time that we really looked at the professional development, where the gaps were, what was needed in the first round. We have settled on a February collection date. The reason we've settled on a February collection date is we know there's a lot of survey fatigue out there. It's impossible to keep up with every survey that goes on. We have a whole department, our research and evaluation department looks at every survey that we do every year and to ensure that there's valid data coming out of it before we give it to the district and the students. But February was the lowest time for anything going on. So we did our second collection in February of 2017, which is also when schools are doing their school improvement plans. So every school is required to do a school improvement plan, and then in March they submit their budgets for the student-based budgeting. So we were giving them data in February that was actionable for their school improvement plans and for planning purposes, so that when they went into their budget hearings and they were asking for more devices, spending money on more devices or this piece of software, that piece of software, that they actually had some actionable data to address the need in their school. So in February 2017, our collection, we got right at 23,000. So we went up by 10,000 responses. We went up to about 4,500 teachers and just under 19,000, 18,500 on students. We just wrapped up our collection for 2018, and again, we're right at 23,000, 24,000 responses. So we think that we've hit the plateau of where we're going to get on responses, and we always look at the statistical significance for a school. We want 100%. We know we'll never get 100% of students responding, but we just keep pushing forward. We know that that's a good large number, and when I looked at other surveys in the district, it's probably the largest collection of data we have in the district. So here's a data highlight. So when you look at this, this is one of the ones that comes out of. It's a 21st century teacher. And remember, I had talked about wanting to do technology assessments for teachers and actually have them take an assessment. This gets at data. This gets at the data the same way, and it's self-reported anonymous data. So when many people look at this slide, and I've shown this slide a number of times. In fact, I was just doing a comparative. This slide to another school district. We both pulled up this slide and said, what do your numbers say? What do my numbers say? The trends are there, I'll tell you that. 23% of our teachers feel that they're highly knowledgeable about digital citizenship skills. And my eyes dart there too, right off the bat. We always want to look at what we're low in. So 23%, yes, we know we're weak in digital citizenship skills, and we have to come up with strategies to address that. What I like about this slide and what I often highlight for leadership is on the left-hand bottom side. And that's that 82% of our teachers believe that technology plays a role in instruction. That's a huge number. I mean, if we're looking at Rogers' diffusion of innovation and technology, that other 18% is about what he calls the laggards, about 15% that just won't come on for anything. If I have 82% of my teachers believing technology is important in the lives of instruction and in the lives of their students, I can move everything else on this slide, including digital citizenship. It is slow. It is moving. It is slow. Another one in here, we always look for quick wins. And one of the quick wins we found in here was teachers' multimedia skills, 41%. 46 said they wanted professional development in this area. So if I pull this same slide for the same data point, which is a built-in data point slide in Brightbites. This is nothing I had to generate other than to click on a button. I know that 72% of my students are strong in multimedia skills. And one of the things we did for a quick win was our high schools are set up in the academies model, and we have a couple of schools that are doing academies of teaching. So these are students that want to be a teacher in the future. And so what we did was we flipped the professional development at that schools, and we had the students begin to give professional development to the teachers on multimedia skills so we could start to bring that number up. And also gave them real-world experience of what it is like to teach adults. Some of them loved it. I mean, it was just, they just relished in that opportunity to show where they had a skill set that a teacher didn't have. And the teachers released and said, you know, this is not a strong point for me, and I can learn. So there are wins in the data that are quick to get at, not only to get the data, but then there's actionable data in there that is quick to work with. Another data highlight, access. We didn't have a good number on what we thought students had access in our district. It had been probably 6 years since we had collected that data. And around that time, it was about 42% of our students saying they had access at home. So the number when it came back that 89% of our students had internet at home was phenomenal. It's a game changer with regards to there is some ability to then extend the day for students. Yes, we know that for a lot of them that is a cell phone, but there are ways to manage Wi-Fi networks at the school so that they have content offline on their devices when they go home. So this was a big win. But one thing that did stick out on this slide for us is that 51% of the students shared a device at home. So that's a big number. You know, depending on who they share it with, if it's a younger brother or sister, they might be able to get away with it. If it's mom or dad may trump their homework. So we have to be careful and cognizant of that. And then in 17-18, you know, we make sure that we always have more initiatives going on. And we have a new initiative that came on in the 17-18 school year, and that was our STEAM initiative. We are Music City, and we have a huge arts community, so we're working on transitioning all our middle schools to a STEAM environment. We have 33 middle schools in our district, and we have a 6-year plan to move every one of them into a STEAM learning environment. Our mission, our vision, really, our mission especially, really focuses on the 4 C's. And the vision is to empower them authentic learning experiences and exceed great expectations. So here's our definition. And again, there's a focus on the 4 C's. So as we're moving into this environment and I'm seeing the 4 C's, what I know is that I don't have enough people to support the level of technology that's going to be a part of this transition. Our district at district-wide is at 3-to-1 device ratios, 3 students per 1 device. We did move in the middle schools in year 1, which was this year right now. We're doing 18 schools, and we have those schools at a 2-to-1 device ratio with a modern device or an up-to-date modern device, Windows 10 device. And we're putting a lot more technology in there, and we brought on a digital tech book. But I know that I need to support these schools with the T portion of the STEAM, and I know that I need to get bodies in these buildings. And that's where my Brightbites data came into play, was I could go to my executive lead team and say, I have data on technology use in this district. I know where the gaps are. I know where the high points are. I know where we need professional development. I know where we can't get our teachers out of the schools. I need support for these 18 schools. I need a body in these schools that help these teachers do technology in an integrated lesson fashion. I asked for 9 people for 18 schools, thinking one person for every 2 schools. I didn't get that. I got 5, and I'll take it and run, because I just got 5 coaches for 18 schools. When I started out in this position, I had 3 coaches for 150 schools. I still have those original 3. They still support all the other schools. But I have a focused intent now on 18 schools and moving the technology integration in those schools forward. That's huge. It's coaches that we need in the schools that we hadn't been allocating before. And I just had a meeting with all of our principals, and they highlighted those coaches as one of the primary reasons that they wanted to be there, wanted them in their schools. It's moved things forward. I also saw gaps. I could look here and see this is how I justified the 2-to-1 spending for technology, was that our teachers had greater access to devices at schools than our students did. And even that, our students had greater access to devices at home than they did at schools. So I wanted to make sure, that's where I made my argument, again, for funding to get schools at a 2-to-1. So it did reduce that ratio. I had data. It was nice to have data to take in, because I've been struggling all along to measure. So we do measure the 4 C's. Again, this is another report that just comes out of Brightbites. And another thing that this does, when we start looking at these questions, and we start to develop a common language about what do we believe communication looks like using technology. What does it look like to collaborate? So we're building common language, and we have those feedback on the 4 C's. And we know where their gaps are. We wonder, why do we have a gap around, creativity when we have students high in wanting to do multimedia? Because the teachers aren't leveraging that yet in their classroom. So we know we now have data points. Another lens that we often look at is the SAMR lens, which our teachers like, most teachers like, because it gives them a good, strong foundation of, it's an easy grasp for them to understand where they are on the spectrum and to understand that everything doesn't have to live at redefinition. So now we now have data. We now have an answer, and our answer is 42. For those of you who are Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxies, we know we have an answer, but do we remember what the question was? That's where we're at. So we have data. The technology and learning module has done great things to drive school improvement plans, to get funding for bodies in the schools, to get technology in the schools. But we have a next step to go in, and that's when we've got a plan for bigger things, because we had that kid in a candy store. And again, we have those 300 software titles running in the district. It's probably more than that, let's be honest, because somebody's using something free that nobody knows about, that only one teacher has seen. And so we need to measure. We need to push forward with our measurements. And we need to know where are we getting return on learning? So we are jumping on board. And we are in the planning and testing phase right now with this for a tool called Learning Outcomes. The reason we're going down this road is simply because we have had success with the technology and learning module. We know that we're collecting good, solid data, and it's actionable data around technology, so we want to continue to push that envelope. So Learning Outcomes is a product that's going to take a little more than implementation than the survey for technology and learning. It was a survey. My department owned it. We used the librarians. We do way too many emails, follow-up texts to principals, whatever we have to do to get that data in. So for the implementation of Learning Outcomes, and Learning Outcomes is a tool that will help us begin to track usage of the different software programs that we have going on in the district, and pair it up with activity and costs. But for this implementation, it's a longer on-ramp. We're working with the IT department to ensure what needs to be on the machines for the tracking. We have to work with the purchasing department to find out what we're really spending on pieces of software. And then we're working with the district assessment group to figure out which data we can put in on the backside so that we can measure that learning outcomes from here. So what we want to measure is we're going to start with just engagement. You know, if you've bought a software product, you know, are your students using, or is it only being used in one grade level? You know, we want to understand how those students are interacting, or if those students are interacting with the product, because we're spending a lot of money on it, and we want to make sure that we're getting the best return. So, like I said, we're going to track the activity for each one. We're going to determine how students feel about these tools. I know my son uses iReady, and he didn't like using it at school until he started taking in an iPad. And then he said, "Dad, I like you doing it on the iPad because it's faster than the school." So it wasn't the software, it was the devices he was getting access to in the school that was impacting his feelings about the technology and his implementation. So we want to know that kind of information. We want to capture the financial details. If it's a district purchase piece of software, we're good. I can tell you how much I spent on Blackboard. But when each school is buying software individually, we're really having to work with the with the purchasing department to determine what the best, to gather that data so we know what it's costing that school. And that way we can start to give them information on their return on investment. And it may impact how we do licensing in this district. You know, I know what I pay for an LMS. If I'm buying it for 20,000 students and I'm paying, you know, $5 a student, but only 10,000 students are using it, my actual cost is $10 a student. So I've got to be concerned with that and look for those gaps and those opportunities. And that's where, you know, we've got to figure out how much we're really paying for a device, a software program. And last, this is the hardest, and we're really working, is we're going to triangulate this in with achievement data. This is the longer term goal. And we want to make sure that, you know, if you're using a product that's actually impacting student growth. And we'll probably start with MapR and MapM data, which we're using in grades 2 through 8. And we would like to get our state achievement data in there so we can start to triangulate this. This is a longer term play. Again, technology and learning survey, we got it in place in 2 months. This is a long-term play, and the potential upside of this long-term play is very good. The one thing I hope to see, and this is strategic abandonment. We find schools often have more than one software program doing the same thing. And once they start to see that, maybe they can recoup some of their money. Maybe they can say, I don't need that. I've got MapR. I don't need this reading program. My students aren't using it. I could allocate those funds someplace else. We put so much on our teachers' plates, our students' plates, and yet we never take anything off. So my hope is that we start to see some strategic abandonment of some of the tools. If they're not being used, we don't need to continue to pay for them. And that definitely impacts budgets at the schools. So that's a little bit of my story, and I'm going to let you listen to someone else speak for a few minutes. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Brett.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's been such a pleasure working with you and the team at Nashville and with technology and learning, and now with learning outcomes. So definitely looking forward to those future discussions as well. Hi, everybody. Brett Lambert here, and Director of Partnerships, been at Brightbites for about 4.5 years or so. And Doug, there were so many pieces of your story that I wanted to touch on, but I guess I'll just say a couple. Using the technology and learning data to make a stand in some of those budgetary discussions, and also utilizing the 4Cs data for the STEAM initiative. And I think a lot of folks on the line can probably admire that a focus on the arts in such a large district. So that's fantastic as well. So today I'm going to walk through looking at a couple of data points from the learning outcomes module, but I wanted to quickly highlight the modules that Doug was discussing and how they kind of fit into a larger picture, and that's the 21st Century Learning Suite. And really, Doug showed a few infographics and mentioned that he's conducting his third data collection to really continue meeting students and teachers where they are, understanding those skill deficits and really identifying the right professional development to fill those gaps. You even mentioned, too, that some of the students were even teaching their teachers, and I love to hear that type of work. But within this within this 21st Century Learning Suite, you've got the technology and learning module, you have the learning outcomes module, which we'll touch on in just a second, and you have the digital privacy module, which is really just wrapping a framework and a common language around digital citizenship, which is, of course, a massive buzzword out there. But today, let's really focus and hone in on the framework for understanding the impact of the technology and learning, with the learning outcomes module, And to speak to the framework, well, we have to look at where this information is coming from in the research, and that really is coming from our partnership with the University of Pennsylvania and our lead researcher there, Dr. Ryan Baker. And he's the director of Penn Center for Learning Analytics, as well as the associate professor at the graduate school there, and has been instrumental in developing some of these data points. And let's take a look at that actual framework that we've been developing with him. So again, here's the framework, and first we're going to be looking at the investment domain, then the engagement domain, and finally end with the impact piece there. But just to speak a couple things about the investment domain, really we're looking at cost and adoption. So number of licenses, the prices, the start and end dates of those subscriptions, and really the active and inactive users. Who's really using this, and how do we leverage that information? Building on that is, of course, the engagement domain. Really looking deeply at when something is being used, what is the frequency and duration and quality of those sessions, and being able to speak to that as well as the perception side. A lot of folks are going out into those classrooms and having good conversations about what folks like to use, what's being used most often by our kiddos, and it's really nice to have some metrics behind those conversations as well. And then finally is the impact domain, and this is really where we're pulling in, bridging that gap between technology use and student achievement. We're doing that by pulling in interim assessment data, as Doug had mentioned with the map pieces there, and really pulling in those assessment data figures to those usage profiles and calculating an impact estimate on those pieces there. So this was just a sort of a representation of the data points in there. Let's take a look at how it gets represented in the dashboard itself. So this is the front dash when you log in. After we've made that connection to your student information system and really pull in that information to the dashboard, here's what it looks like. And one of the first questions I always ask is, do you have a master list of software tools, right? Because that's the first thing we need to do is gather that good list. And this is a really common challenge, as Doug mentioned, with the 300 software titles that he has there, and maybe some free ones that we're not sure about. And I love the strategic abandonment. I'm completely stealing that from you, Doug. Sorry, and I'll try to cite you as often as I can, of course. But to illustrate that point, I wanted to tell a brief story about a close colleague of mine, Brian Gannon, who's the technology director at South Milwaukee Public Schools in Wisconsin. Every year he gets together with his technology team and has a common challenge of trying to get rid of programs that aren't being used. And the only mechanism he has to do that are those conversations with the teachers. So he's having those conversations, pulling that anecdotal feedback in, the team's analyzing it. But while that's all taking place, the school board is on his back saying, Brian, you're adding new tools every year and not getting rid of anything. What are you doing? And then when he finally gets rid of one of those tools because of the pressure, the teachers end up coming out of the woodwork and are upset that he got rid of some of their favorite tools they've been using for years. And he says, Brett, I can never win. So when he looked at this module, he looked at this list of tools, he said, this is where I can start to bring those conversations into objectivity. And I was really excited to hear that. So as we look at the list of tools, we can dive into an individual tool, and that's what we're looking at now is 10 Marks Math. We're now inside this profile. Of course, this is sample data. Anybody who's from 10 Marks Math on the line, these are not real numbers, but a representation. And within that comprehensive list, here's its profile. We've got its investment pieces, the engagement, and the impact. And let's dive into the investment domain, or the investment success indicator, so to speak, and look at the true cost of this tool. So the bottom figure there, it's kind of small on my screen too, so maybe we zoom in a little bit, but we paid $9.14 or so when we initially purchased this tool. But now after weaving in the usage profiles, we actually understand that this tool is costing us almost $45 a student because it's really not being used across the district. And again, we need to weave the hard numbers into those conversations to make sure that they're doing the right thing for our budget, but also for our kiddos as well. Building on that, we're taking a look at the active licenses, active and inactive. I think it's really important to call out how we start to differentiate some of those pieces, active and passive usage. We're tracking the unique trail of data that's left on a web page. So when folks log into 10 Marks Math, we're able to see whether it's just open in the background or they're actually engaging with the tool, which is a very important differentiation and plays out in this data point here. Then we're looking at all of our schools across the district. Who's really using these tools? I think this brings up a good point when looking at local control versus district control, right? Do we have a common language to discuss who's using what tools? Are schools allowed to onboard new tools on their own? And if so, is that playing out in this figure that we have so many tools that we don't even know that are being used at these schools? And so again, leveraging the objectivity to have those subjective conversations at each building, but also each grade level as we dig farther down into the grades. Again, if it was purchased K-12 across the district and it's really only being used in the middle school, let's say, we need to definitely strategically abandon for the rest of the grades there. And then finally, we're looking at the average session time and then, of course, weaving in the achievement data towards the end. So again, looking at the cost, adoption, the frequency, the average session times, really getting a good picture of the usage, who's using it. And finally is it having an impact? We pull in that interim assessment data to calculate that return on learning, and what we mean by that is it's really about seeing the true impact digital tools have on achievement and student growth, and knowing that your money is invested into the program and it's being spent on a tool that works, frankly. And somebody may be wondering how we do that work really, and what we're doing is we're really calculating an impact estimate by looking at the strength of the relationship between usage and achievement and the direction of the relationship. And then we're able to calculate a confidence interval using regression analysis to make sure that we're really getting that good story, that good narrative down. Of course, we're not saying that 10 marks math causes these scores, but that correlational research is what we're doing here. And it's really exciting to see some of those things play out. And so with that, I think we're kind of running low on time. With that, I'm going to pass it back over to Andrew to open it up for some Q&A. Andrew, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Well, thank you so much, Brett, and thank you, Doug, for what I think everyone would agree was a really very, very interesting presentation, and a lot of questions have come out of that from the audience. So we'll get to those in a second. But first, I just want to let everyone know that you can learn more about the Brightbites 21st Century Learning Suite, including the learning outcomes and technology and learning modules, by visiting www.brightbites.net. And also be aware that everyone who's on the call today will receive the learning outcomes checklist with 3 action items to ensure your EdTech programs have high return on learning. Now, we have about 9 minutes left for questions, and as I said, we have a lot of them that have already come in. So let's see how many we can get through. I'm going to turn first to you, Doug. In Nashville, does the school system provide professional development for the teachers to be able to cope with integrating technology into the classrooms? I mean, are there summer sessions? Are they paid to do these things? It's always been one of those big things of getting teachers familiar with the technology. And how are you doing it in Nashville?
So anytime a new product comes into the district, we try and make sure that they leverage, starting with the company, as a way to get the professional development. But yes, we do offer summer PD on a wide variety of topics. We do a lot of online professional development. Like I said, it's often hard to get our teachers out of the schools. So we're comprehensive. We will launch our PD schedule actually this month for the whole summer. And then next year, we are implementing, especially for technology teachers, because thankfully they're seeing a growth in technology teachers, some mentoring going out into the schools to support these teachers, to hopefully grow some technology teachers in the schools to help support those initiatives going on in the school. Do they get paid? Generally, no. Unless it's a required PD in our district, it is voluntary coming into professional development.
Okay, great. Brett, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, I was muted.
You might be on mute.
No. Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was talking and I was like, oh boy, okay, here we go. Yeah, no, so I think you're spot on, and I wanted to just call out too that there's a lot of support from the customer success team at Brightbites as well. I think that's a really important part of getting everybody set up for success and sitting down, identifying goals to really think through what are we doing with this data, right? How do we take it off the shelf and make it actionable? And we're very intentional about that process. So I definitely wanted to add that really quickly as well.
Okay. And I would actually piggyback on that one more thing, Andrew, is that each of the data points in Brightbites has some quick wins, some research associated. So as you drill down into Brightbites, if I can't get out there to provide the PD to the teachers, if they're looking at their data, there are quick wins on how to move that data point embedded in. So there is research embedded into Brightbites that the teachers have access to.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I'm going to stick with you, Doug, for the next question, which comes from Jill, who's interested in learning more about the coaches that you're using and the credentials for hiring coaches and what credentials they have.
So our coaches, we do not have in our district, we do not have a technology teacher or technology coach this year job description. We have written it this year as a job description. What we did was, we poached from schools with good technology teachers. Sorry to say, that's what we did. We did a pool with a 3-step application where they had to create learning objects, they had to do a video. Then once we onboarded them, we ensured that we had a wide variety of teachers. We have an art teacher who loved technology. We have a high school math teacher who loved technology that we brought on. Now, once they're on with us, they will become Microsoft Innovative Educators. We will provide PD to them to grow their skill set and get their certifications. They will be Microsoft Office Suite certified, industry certifications. So we'll grow them once they're here. Our hope is to create a specific job description for a technology coach going into the 18-19 school year before we start to hire the next round. Budget praise that we get to hire more.
Okay. All right, terrific. All right, well, let me turn back to Brett for a minute. And Brett, a question coming in from Melissa who wanted to know, where is the SAMR Lens report?
Yeah, it's a good question, Melissa. It's actually an add-on as part of the reporting area. And if you go on the front dashboard, there's actually a little tab that says reports, and you can scroll down and identify that. And I think you're at Omaha, I think we've been working with you for a number of months, if not years. And so we can talk more about that with you directly as well if we follow up after the call to identify where that lives.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Doug, back to you. You talked about the surveys that you did in Nashville, particularly about one of the things that involved what was being used at home. And the question that from Justin is, did you collect data on what the internet access device was? Was it phones, tablets, computers? Did you get that breakdown?
Yes, there is a breakdown into that, and it is reported out. It was heavily used on tablets and phones were our primary devices in the home use setting. At school, it was traditionally laptops or desktops. So we do have that dichotomy that you would expect, and that data is collected in there in the survey.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I hope that, Justin, I hope that answers your question. And I'll come back now to Brett. Brett, can you talk a little bit about how district leaders use the TNL data to drive decision-making? Do you have some examples? I mean, you obviously talk to a lot of schools and work with a lot of schools. Can you have some examples that you could share with us?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think the most direct move is identifying skill gaps, as Doug spoke to, as far as identifying that teachers were multimedia skills, and identifying the correct PD to move forward, going into that insights layer and identifying some good PD next steps in order to fill those gaps of skills. But on the other front is embedding data into strategic planning, I think is really common as well. Just again, having specific data points actually embedded into your strategic plan can be really helpful and informative when presenting to the board and things like that. Hiring, I think, is a big one too, to understand support structures from the IT side as well as from the instructional side. So do we need more technology coaches in the classroom? Do folks feel supported? And from the IT side, do you think when things break, are they being fixed? And if not, is that impacting instruction and things like that? So just a couple. I could probably ramble on forever, but I'll stop there.
All right, well, that's fine. We literally have only about a minute left. So, Doug, I'm going to come back to you for a very, very short answer, and I think it is a quick question. You mentioned the 18 schools in Nashville. The question is, were they the middle schools that you were talking about, or can you expand on that?
Yes, it is. We are working over a 6-year plan to transform all 33 of our middle schools to a STEAM learning environment. We started with 18 in year 1. We'll add additional 10 beginning in the 18-19 school year, and then we'll add the last 5 in the 3rd year, and they'll be supported for a number of years. So it's a long-term project.
Okay. All right. Well, terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. We have, unfortunately, blown right through the entire hour, and that is all the time that we have allotted. Before everyone heads out, I did realize that if you want to, you can download the Return on Learning checklist from your console right now if you want to do that before we go off the air here. And if we did not have time to get to your question and you asked one, Doug or Brett or someone from their teams will follow up with you directly to get you an answer. So as we wrap up, I want to thank Doug Renfro and Brett Lambert again for their excellent presentations. And I'd also like to thank Brightbites for its support today. And one final reminder, we will be sending out email to everyone who attended the webinar when the recording is ready. And thank you all, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.